So let's say that somebody says something and you get offended. That's not necessarily an error. It's just the habit. That's just what's been occurring for a very long time, and that's okay. The emotion that you're feeling is okay. What's happening is okay. But because we're not new to being human, we know what happens if we go down paths, if we give it energy, if it gains momentum. We know well enough that it will turn from one thing to another thing to another thing that we don't want. And so in this way, when one of the practices I'm developing is an emotional practice. And of course, it's going to relate to Chinese medicine because it needs to be within my scope of practice to offer to people. But often throughout the day, I have to stop and say, Ernest, where are you? Where are you in the categories, the functional grouping that you've created for yourself? Because it's easier to remember to have a nice functional grouping to go back to. Where are you right now? Oh, you're getting really irritated by small things. Like every little bit is just grinding your gears. That's an Ernest thing, not a Donna thing or a Shayna thing or an Ida or Lauren thing. I'm the one getting irritated at things that I wouldn't normally get irritated at. So that's me. Oh, okay, I can see that now. And then I can redirect and go back to the practice. But it's not ignoring, it's not, of course, it's not judging, and it's absolutely not getting down on ourselves, which is, I think, what we're also talking about with judgment. Like when we judge ourselves, it's a form of getting down on yourself. Very rarely does a person use that term, judge ourselves, when they're congratulating, like when they did something good and like, yeah, I did really good. People don't typically use the term you judged yourself in that regard. It still is, if you look at it, I guess it's still a form of judgment, but we typically associate negative things to the word judgment. And then we have to differentiate things like judgment from discernment, because you need to be able, your brain wants to judge situations. Is this person safe? Maybe they're 100,000% safe. They're perfectly safe. But in your life, in your experience, based on everything so far, you judge. And it happens. It's going to happen. But it's not so much about things not happening. It's more about what do we do when we observe it ourselves, when there's self-awareness and we can see it. And that is the question. Where is my mind? Where is my practice? When I'm doing my emotional practice, where are my emotions and what am I doing with them? It is almost always negative, isn't it, Eden? When we use that term, judging, it's usually a negative connotation. We don't usually use the word discernment in a negative connotation, but they're pretty similar things that are occurring. It would probably come down to semantics to differentiate the two. But we need to discern. We need to judge to some degree, right? So this goes back to one of our core foundational principles of this practice and of everything that I will ever speak about or offer, is that we are not looking for absolute opposites. That doesn't exist. I had never met Buddha. I don't know anybody who's happy all the time, right? We're looking to harmonize with the relative situation, with the relative circumstances, and how we're presenting in the moment. Even the word balance sometimes sounds stagnant. It sounds like an achievement. It sounds like a state that we have arrived at. And I don't really observe that. I observe sometimes slight oscillations and sometimes tumultuous, huge oscillations, but never no oscillations, never. And this was brought out, and of course I knew this, but I really like how it was brought out by one of my teachers, Dr. Kwan. And I was discussing an emotional treatment. And it's a treatment that is specifically designed to help somebody who is in a deep, chronic, long-standing emotional disharmony. And he just made the point. There is no emotion that is bad. There is no such thing as a bad emotion. It is a form of communication. Your body, your mind, your spirit, everything outside of you and inside of you is attempting to communicate with each of the other parts. Your mind is trying to communicate with your body is trying to communicate with your mind. Both of those are communicating with spirit. Spirit's communicating with the body and the mind at all times. This is a constant thing that's occurring between. Of course, there is no real separation, but there is a functional separation. We create functional separation out of things so that we can talk about them, work with them, improve certain skills that maybe we want to improve. So is the body and mind separate? No. Can we talk about it in a separate way so that in a functional way? Sure, we can. For example, the things that you think about can make you physically sick. There still is no separation between the body and the mind, but functionally we can look at the thought as being mind and the ulcer that we have created as being physical. But ultimately, the more that we look at it, especially if we're getting philosophical, there's no separation. Not really. So I think that's a good reminder that our practice is principle based. And one of those principles is that we do not necessarily, even though sometimes we do, the opposite extremes are not the goal. And in fact, when I hear opposite extremes as the goal, my mind instantly, maybe even habitually, repetitively, and maybe it doesn't serve me, but my mind will immediately call bullshit. So when someone is like, we're aiming to never feel fear, I'm like, what? Why? Why would you not want to feel fear? Like, I get it. Pathological fear. Fear is the root of a lot of dysfunction, of course. But that doesn't mean that we should never have, you can't have courage without fear, right? So we're looking for a relative harmony between opposites. I say relative because that means that it's still oscillating.